John Hodgman, everybody, let him hear that one more time.
Thank you very much, Sirius XM employees who are compelled to be here. I appreciate your getting the memo and valuing your jobs. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much.
This is kind of interesting because you and I, as we sit here doing this interview, we have no idea who will be elected president, but
you don't.
Yeah, you don't. But the audience already knows. By the time we play this,
yes, they
will know.
Yes.
So we're kind of time travelers.
You want to hear my prediction, and then the audience will know if I was correct. Or not? It's going to be a Romney landslide.
Mm-hmm.
How many electoral votes can you possibly get?
I think it's 578, isn't that it?
He's going to get
538.
Oh, okay. Right, because of the Nate Silver Trader blog. That's why. He will get 638 electoral votes.
Wow! What a giant upset!
I know.
So Canada comes rolling in, or is it Mexico?
Yeah, about half of each. Well, because Mitt Romney is Mexican by heritage.
Right.
His grandfather was protected there for reasons having to do with the Mormon Church. And then Barack Obama and Chris Christie are both going to retire immediately in shame and form a detective agency.
All right. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, when people are listening to this weekend, they're going to be going, how the hell did he do that? That's amazing. He knew exactly today's newspaper.
Well, Nate Silver has what he calls the math. I have the real math, which is the gut feeling I have in my heart.
Do you read Nate Silver and his
predictions?
Yeah, I don't. Well, they're not predictions.
His science predictions.
Yeah, his science.
I don't need science to know the heart of the American people. I am a deranged millionaire, as you know, and so I am able to tell the people what their hearts should tell them by offering them in my advice and as their employer my order that they vote for Mitt Romney, or else I'll be forced to shut down everything.
Shut down everything that you own.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have to John Galt it. I will leave. I'm warning America right now. Well, you're the last people that I can influence, but if
this is it.
This is it.
Because I will tell you, Hodgman shrugged. That's where we are with this right now. He is not taking this. You've worked too hard for the people.
No, I'm tired of. I'm a self-made man. You know what I mean? I came up through the hard Scrabble streets of Brookline, Massachusetts. I put myself through a 4-year accredited university in Southern Connecticut called Yale. Maybe you've heard of it. And by put myself through, I mean my parents paid for it. I did it all myself, and I don't know why all these losers want a handout from me all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? So
now at this point, why couldn't they have done just the same thing that you did? They could have been born.
They could have been born in an affluent suburb of Boston.
Would have been perfect.
To a happy family.
Yes. Mom and dad.
Who never wanted for anything. And then go to a really good public high school, and then go to a fine accredited university like Yale. Anyone could have done exactly the same thing as me.
And the thing is,
you all chose to be losers and radio people,
right? Well,
and alternative types. I'm sorry.
You also managed to do it disease-free, unlike a lot of people out there who think to themselves, "I'm born with something."
Excuse me, I have asthma.
Is that
I even overcame a congenital asthma condition in order to become a famous minor television personality. Only in America, folks.
Is anyone actually even sure if that's a physical ailment or mental?
Yeah, well, no, wait a minute. Doctors.
I don't know.
Doctors are sure.
Because I've seen a lot of movies, that karate movie, I don't know which one it was, but they were able to throw away the inhaler after he started to believe in himself.
Did you see in that scene when they threw away the inhaler, me scrambling after it? I got it! Yeah, I have to hoard inhalers. No, it's for real.
But doesn't it come on at times of stress or...
No, it comes on when I don't use medication.
Okay, so it's nothing to do with the fact of, because this karate movie, and I can't think of the name of it.
Sure.
It was the last thing Joe Piscopo starred in, though. So I know that for a fact.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can understand why you would hold that up as evidence over the team of doctors that I have seen over my entire life, because they're all part of Big Pharma, and Joe Piscopo is telling the truth. No, I understand. I get it.
You have written this book, That Is All.
Yes.
And this is the third.
That is my third book of complete world knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote my first book of complete world knowledge was called The Areas of My Expertise. Then I discovered some more knowledge, so I had to write some more called More Information Than You Require. And this is the third and indeed final book of complete world knowledge called That Is All. So when I say complete world knowledge, I mean to say that these are books of trivia. They're books of like old-time encyclopedias, amazing true facts and fascinating trivia, like the old Book of Lists or Big Secrets or the People's Almanac or Uncle John's Bathroom Reader, a big influence upon me. With the exception that, unlike all of those books, I guarantee you that all of the facts in my books are made up by me.
Right.
Right. So, when you talk about presidents, in my books, in those books, there might be a list of the 9 U.S. presidents who were insomniacs. Whereas in my book, it's the 9 U.S. presidents who had hooks for hands. And you never knew that FDR had a hook for a hand because they only, photographed him from the wrist up. And his hook was shaped like a wheelchair. So people didn't know. These were the books that I wrote The Areas of My Expertise in 2005. And it transformed my life in the sense that my life was transformed. You know that sense? But I wrote that book, and I was asked to go on the Daily Show to promote that book. And we had a good time on the show, and they asked me to come back and do comedy on the show. And so I did. And so suddenly I had a new career. You
didn't do really comedy before that. You were just...
No, I wouldn't say that I did comedy. I guess I did what could be called literary humor, or precious chuckles for the arched eyebrows set.
Precious chuckles.
Precious chuckles, which I actually have tattooed on my abdomen in Thug Life lettering. That was my name. No, I didn't do comedy per se. I mean, I was for a brief time a publishing professional in the 90s when there were books, and then I quit that in order to write for magazines, which also used to exist in the past. I mean, I really do feel like I've had my finger in every dying media of all time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
And I somehow just get rescued at the last minute before that ship goes down. So I worked as a literary agent, and then I worked as a writer for magazines. But what I was also doing at the same time was using an emerging technology called the internet to write humor, primarily for a humor website called McSweeney's, where I was writing an advice column. Once I quit being a literary agent, I wrote an advice column called Ask a Former Professional Literary Agent. And people would, write in and say, what sort of books should I write? And I was like, vampires versus serial killers, obviously. People would write and say, what should I do to get my book published? And I was like, I would tell them what kind of special beret they had to wear in order to be a successful author. And then people would write in and ask my opinion on, heartbreak and chronic knee pain and hangover cures, and I would answer those questions as best I could, which is to say I would make up answers that sounded authoritative.
But always played the expert at every point of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because I was coming from a world of book publishing in which, everyone there, I already knew that if you just claimed to be an expert, suddenly you would be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had been hired in my early 20s to work at this literary agency, and suddenly, accomplished, striving and accomplished authors, people who had done amazing things, were sending their manuscripts to me to evaluate whether or not they were saleable in the book market. And I was like, I'm 23 years old, but I'll tell you, yes, this is a terrible idea, because most of the time they were. They were usually terrible, terrible books that were sent to me. But I was being asked to evaluate and negotiate contracts without having been prepared for it in any way, without any sort of training. And because everyone in the world wants to write a book, they would accept my word as an authority on the subject.
Because we're all out there looking for some kind of feedback, and we're glad that somebody's taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And saying, I have this.
Ultimately, I felt that was beyond a level of fraudulency that I felt comfortable with. So I just became an outright fraud, which is I just right. I was just going to say, you know what, I'm faking it. So the character that I was writing in, the former professional literary agent character, was me. It was sort of, I took everything that I learned and then I would say it in an incredibly authoritative way that also revealed that I was absolutely deranged, and it was clear that it was clear that it was fake. But I learned something really interesting and important. Like at the time that I started working in the book publishing, it was because I wanted to write serious short stories about people with feelings, like a dope. Do you know what I mean? And I was incredibly discouraged at first by seeing all of the books, all the manuscripts, which is what we had at the time, because we didn't have computers. Do you know what I mean? Where we had computers, but they were powered by, monkeys on a treadmill.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like they were really old. So we get these physical things called manuscripts, these huge stacks of paper, and they would be shoved at you day after day after day after day, and you would read them, and sometimes they were heartbreakingly great, but mostly they were just terrible, terrible books. And I would say 30% of them were intent on describing the coming race war. A lot of people who sit at home, to be a novelist, you have to be insane. Basically, you have to be such a narcissist that you believe that the world needs to hear what you have to say for up to 1,000 pages at a time. Do you know what I mean? And so a large percentage of those unpublished novelists out there were writing about how all the world leaders secretly are reptilian humanoids who eat human babies, and that there's going to be a race war soon.
But I love the fact that they would spend all these times writing
all which
stuff.
is true, by the way. Don't get me wrong. All which we're feeling it right now on election day. We know that it's true, but it doesn't make for great fiction.
And by the way, and the people listening to this will know, but I'm really concerned that if Romney loses, white people are going to riot. There's just an odd feeling that they'll just be running in the streets.
Oh, white people are so mad these days. You know how mad white people are? No, I can't have everything I want right now. Because of moochers. I started doing this deranged millionaire character on The Daily Show recently just because of the number of hedge fund managers and financial sector people who are just so mad at Obama. The people who are, and Romney said that thing about the 47% of Americans being, considering themselves victims. I'm trying to be really accurate as to what he said, because I was really amazed that he would later say, "Oh yeah, I just misstated." Do you know what I mean? He laid it out. He said that they were victims who he could not convince to take responsibility for their own lives, and therefore he didn't have to worry about them in terms of the election. I don't think he meant I didn't have to worry about them at all, but he would never be able to convince them to vote for him because he stands for the right-thinking people who take care of themselves and don't want the government to give them handouts all the time. Well, I was at that special secret deranged.
You were there.
Oh yeah, it was great. Oh yeah. I go to all of those things. and it's going to be a great party when there's a life-size butter sculpture of Ayn Rand. That's where you're like, only the best. And I heard him say that. And I knew that he was not misspeaking. He was laying out an argument that almost half of the people in the United States are deadbeats, basically. And I don't know that he necessarily believed or believes that. I think, but I do know for sure that that's what people in that room wanted to hear.
Yeah, nobody in the room went, "What? What are you saying, sir?"
They were like, slow clap for you. Finally, someone. Yeah. And then
the slow clap. Finally, yeah.
No, allow me to rattle my tennis bracelet in your support. It's like, my ivory cane, I stomp on the floor to say yes. Just an incredible amount of wealth was accumulated in the financial sector over the past 15 years or so, and great for them. That's terrific. But it was really interesting to me when I was a freelance magazine writer, and I created this Deranged millionaire character in the early 2000s for a series of videos that I did with the band They Might Be Giants when they needed a villain to appear in their videos. And I thought it would be funny if I said, I'm a deranged millionaire, an unnamed deranged millionaire who hates They Might Be Giants, and I'm causing them, I'm sending them on a pointless quest around the world, and that was the point of the video. And at that time, as I say, I was a professional writer, and even worse, a literary humorist. I didn't think I would ever be a deranged thousandaire, never mind anything else. And then what happened was, my career was kind of kidnapped very happily by television. First The Daily Show, and then by a major computer corporation, which I cannot name, called Apple Computers. You may not know that I was in a series of ads for Apple Computers. I had a great time doing them. The ads are over now. I guess because we sold all the computers. I guess
yes,
they're out of computers.
All done.
So
we're all done. Everyone's got them.
I don't know why else they would take away the most important thing, the only thing that gave my life meaning. But it has to be that. That has to be the reason. Asthma attack. But
stress. Say it brings it on.
Oh, you're right, Joe Piscopo.
Once again,
Dr. Piscopo is correct. All I need is an herbal remedy and no stress. So. But that transformed my life in a lot of ways, one of which was I had a measure of financial independence that I never imagined that I would ever have. And it's amazing what that does to a human being. First of all, you stop having asthma attacks because stress kind of goes away. And it's embarrassing to admit and shameful to admit how many of the neuroses that I associated with, fear of confrontation, maybe bad. Well, I knew I had a happy childhood, so I don't know why I was feeling so neurotic all the time. I realized now it's because I was afraid that I wasn't going to have any money. And when you feel for a moment, oh, I'm going to be okay, suddenly life, none of you deadbeats would understand
no,
this.
they're not going to get it.
No.
Probably ever. You
know what? You keep paying your therapist to tell you mommy and daddy did it to you, but the fact is, make some money like me, you'll feel a lot better. But it's like, it was amazing how much a need for therapy went away.
And that's then your confidence comes in. And, we've always talked about women saying that they're gold diggers, but women kind of like confident men, and guys with a lot of money have a lot of confidence.
I think that's true. And well, I don't have a ton of confidence, but I just felt better most of the time. And now you can't see it on the radio, but I have this mustache on my face, which I've grown because I'm 41 years old now, so I am announcing to the world, I have a mustache. I am no longer a sexual being. I am ready to enter the weird, embarrassing dad phase of my life, where I'm just going to make puns all the time, and that sort of thing. So, but what I did notice, and this I promise you, will all come back together in a second. But I did notice that when I had some financial means, all of a sudden, it not only makes you confident, it makes you overconfident. And you can imagine what it is. You people probably can't imagine, but you have a career of some kind, so you can probably imagine. Once you no longer feel free from human want, and imagine what it would be like to be a hedge fund manager, where you have more money than you could possibly spend ever. And you have to look around and try to come up with we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And you have to come up with a story that explains why you have so much and so many people don't. And part of the story is you deserve it. And you know what? You probably do. You probably worked real hard. You're probably very skilled at what you do. You probably had some flashes of inspiration. You probably also, if unless you're a total sociopath, are able to acknowledge that there was some luck in your life and some good fortune, and that you had a head start. I think Mitt Romney, for for everything he has said, one thing I say that I absolutely agree with was, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, it was like, I had one of the greatest advantages in the world. I was born in America. And I'm like, yeah, that's not untrue. Do you know what I mean? That's for real. But you also, there are people who do have to come up with a part of that story, which is the people who don't have as many millions of dollars as I do, don't deserve it.
Yeah.
That they're just losers who don't deserve it, and they just want stuff from me. And I think that's a pretty pernicious way to order your life. And consequently, you have these these extremely wealthy individuals who, you know, I don't know if you read the thing in the New Yorker about Leon Cooperman, who was the hedge fund manager, multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, who had voted for Obama in 2008 and has now really changed his tune and is sending out open letters to the world, because every dumb white guy with money thinks the world wants to hear what they have to say. Do you know what I mean? And he's sending out open letters to the New York Times and everything, sort of trashing Obama. And when it drilled down to it, part of it had to do with the fact that he went to a state dinner for Obama, and he had given a copy of a book of poetry that his granddaughter had written to Obama to pass on to his daughters, and he didn't get a thank you note. And at that moment, he was just like, enough with this.
Right.
How dare you not appreciate what it... It's like, you know, look, you did a good job, but we don't have to be constantly writing thank you notes. It's like the financial sector almost destroyed our entire economy. Both President Bush and President Obama followed through on a bailout plan that stabilized things. And those guys are mad that they didn't get thank you notes for taking the money.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, ugh.
And none of us got an apology. No one in America got the, hey, thanks for bailing us out. We really screwed up there for a while.
No.
All you have to do
was what they doubled down on.
Yeah.
You know, we're job creators. You need us in order to live.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you don't make $1 million or $2 million a year or whatever it is, you must be doing something wrong. When it might just be, I'm just trying to live my life. Like, I just want to write my literary humor and get on with things.
All you have to do is go to a restaurant downtown when a lot of those guys come in.
Yeah.
It must feel like 1938 when the Nazis came in right before they started, you know, just yelling shit out.
You're going to some dark places now. I don't know. Are you having a stroke? What's going on?
Asthma.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have that?
Stroke. No, you know what? Oh my gosh, this could go horribly wrong. Mark took my coat and it has my inhaler in it. Anything could happen at this point, guys.
Well, I don't...
It's the magic of live tape internet radio.
You know, I don't even
Satellite
know...
radio, sorry.
I don't even know whether we changed these tiles or not. But some of these tiles have had trouble if you can't breathe in here.
Oh, really?
Put that out of your mind. Let it go. Same with the carpeting. It was all from the storm.
Ladies
and all
gentlemen,
got cut up.
The famous ceiling tile comedy of Ron Bennington.
How did you make...
I've never seen someone throw to the ceiling tiles as a comedy bit. That was amazing.
Well, I really wasn't going for comedy as much as I was just blind panic. If we can get that feeling of...
Yeah. You're trying to get me to have an asthma attack.
Right.
So you can talk me down and we'll make satellite radio history.
That's what I'm looking for.
You're going to talk me down Piscopo style?
Come on, give it to me.
Yeah.
Believe in yourself.
But I mean, the thing is that, every time I look at that inhaler, I remember that I am a creature of civilization. Right. And I love, I read Ayn Rand. There's a lot in there that's like, yeah, that's right. I am the best. All these takers and everything else. And I am absolutely, utterly for personal responsibility, for people having the freedom to make as much money as they want and can. I'm for private property. I'm for capitalism. I'm for everything else. Do you know what I mean? But I think the idea that we're all out there in the woods fighting on our own, and that we're all that's how we should order society is loathsome. Because I look down, and it's like I see that asthma inhaler, and 50 years ago I might be dead. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, no, now there is a big business of, pharmaceuticals, but in general, civilization and the governments that make civilization work properly is really good for pasty, sedentary people like myself. And my having asthma is sort of like the one thing, like that's the least of most people's worries. Do you know what I mean? So I like to have that nearby. Because it reminds me that I am dependent on other people. I'm dependent on civilization and science and society in order to be here. And reminds me that the idea that we can all just be independent hunter-gatherers who just go out there and get it for ourselves and don't help anyone else is a fantasy for most humans. Do you know what I mean?
And that also helps you feel responsibility towards other people too. You're responsible for what they need.
Yes, I suppose so.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if I see a guy who's gasping on the street, I'll give him a puff. Of course.
I did not know they were called puffs.
A puff of my inhaler is what I mean. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. If I see a fellow asthmatic on the street, because we're part of the club.
Sure. Like two guys on Harleys passing each other on the highway. It's just that feeling.
Yeah, exactly so.
Put out the inhalers.
I have an asthmatic motorcycle club.
It goes really slow.
Yeah.
When did you know, though? When did you know that you had humor, that you could not only write, but find this character and be able to deliver?
Well, I think that, I always loved comedy growing up. It was really important to me. And I always had a sense of humor. Like, I don't want to be braggy, but it was pretty funny growing up, and I enjoyed doing comedy. I enjoyed getting laughs. But, I went to college and got pretentious and got serious, and I loved writing. Excuse me. That's not an asthma attack. That's just gastrointestinal problems. Okay. Yeah, I ate food earlier. And so I had this idea, and I love all writing and I love all storytelling, and I had this idea that I wanted to write these serious short stories. I was not so much of a sociopath that I felt I could write a novel, because I have no strong feelings about the coming race war. I just wanted to write short stories about people doing things, which is the most boring thing you can possibly do. And on some level, I knew it, and I hacked away at that for a while and had some moderate success and some amazing experiences trying to make a living or in that world, even though I knew I couldn't make a living. But it was when I started writing. McSweeney's is an amazing literary journal. And website that started by the writer Dave Eggers, that was publishing serious short stories and fiction and nonfiction and journalism, and also some really great humor by some of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, including Tim Carvel. I met through McSweeney's, and he's now the head writer at The Daily Show, for example. And I got this email. At a time when email was hand delivered by AOL butlers, and it was Dave looking for contributions to his new venture called McSweeney's, and I sent him a couple of my short stories, and he said no, thank you, and then I sent him a letter that I had written to my friend Josh Sato in Seattle as a joke. That was told from the point of view of this deranged publishing professional giving advice to his nephew about how to get into publishing. And it was revealed over the course of first he said, you have to really apply yourself, and I know you want to come out here and get a job and become a writer, but it's a hard work, and I see lots of manuscripts every day, and part of the problem is most writers don't have a voice. And if you would like to get a voice, I can sell you one. It's a small machine that you have to insert into your ear with a wire, and then plug that in once a night, and you will suddenly have a voice. And I know I can sell it for you. When you come to see me in New York, could you please bring me money because I'm sleeping on the couch of my office? And so it started out very authoritative, and then went into this really strange, deranged place. And Dave said, "Let's publish that." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I started writing for McSweeney's, just writing humor in this voice of a deranged authority. And there's a writer named George Saunders who I admire a lot, and he had said in an interview something that really resonated with me, which was when he realized he was allowed to be funny, he felt like his hands were untied for the first time in his writing career. It felt like he had been boxing with one hand the entire time, and one hand was tied behind his back that he didn't know he had. Which is how you train boxers, by the way. You convince them that they only have one hand. It's a brutal sport. And that's how I felt as well. As soon as I started writing funny, I felt unleashed in a way. Not unleashed. I'm not a rabid dog, nor am I going on Byron Allen's show. Does that show still exist?
If it does, it should.
Yeah,
it should.
right.
We'd be crazy
Do you know what I'm talking about? That show, Byron Allen Unleashed? If there's one guy who's going to let those crazy comedy dogs off the chain, it is Byron Allen. No offense, Byron Allen. No, Byron Allen hates me. I loved you on Real People, Byron Allen. Moving on. I felt suddenly, I found that voice that I was telling my imaginary nephew Josh you could only get by inserting a machine into your brain. Instead, it's just you just work and you wait for it, and then you suddenly you hear it when it comes out of you. And if that's funny, then you have that as a gift, and if it's not funny, then you might have something else as a gift.
But to be able to do that and also be able to walk on the Daily Show and at least fake confidence enough that you belong there, and we're ready to spar a little bit with John. It seems like it's almost two different skill sets, no? Or do you feel like it's the same?
I had once I started writing funny, I started learning how to perform funny, and I was hosting a variety show in a former mayonnaise factory turned bar in Williamsburg.
Sounds delicious.
It was it combined two of my favorite things, mayonnaise and alcohol.
Which would be a perfect name for your next book.
Like no kidding. I was just like, every time I was there, it's like, I don't know what's the tragedy. I don't know which is the tragedy, that this used to be a mayonnaise factory.
It's like a Reese's Cup commercial.
Like, should I feel really sad or really happy? Yeah, I know. So this would be, I would invite my friends who are writing things and performing things, musicians, singers, comedians, writers, and I was hosting it, basically in a comedic vein. I felt like that was my job, and so I had gotten what chops I had as a performer. I honed over that monthly show, which I did for about 5 years in Williamsburg. And by the time I went on the Jon Stewart show, called The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, in November of 2005, I had been touring around performing material from the first book, which I mean to say reading material, but then gradually just knowing the material and being able to speak it. So I had preparation, but ultimately it just comes down to faking it. You know what I mean? It's like, I think I am a fraud. That is my profession. But you do have to be honest about it to some degree. Do you know what I mean? Like, all artists to some degree have to be fakers. They have to pretend that they belong where they are. They have to sort of drown out the voices that tell them, no, there are millions of manuscripts passing into this literary agency every day. There are millions of comics going up at stand-up open mics every night. Do you know what I mean? There are millions of people who want to make a movie. There are millions of people who want to make a TV show. There are millions of people who want to make a song. You have to pretend that you belong there and not doubt yourself, or else you won't have the persistence it takes to get to where you need to be. And then the consolation is, there are those millions and millions of people, but most of them are crazy and not good at what they do. So
they just make the line longer, but once you get there, you're fine.
And the thing, in a way, it was so much easier to go on the Daily Show and fake confidence than it would be to go on my own variety show and fake confidence, because with the Daily Show, it's part of the performer's ethos. Like, I'm not going to fuck up the Daily Show. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't even stop to indulge a second guess. It's not my show. Like, I have to do what I'm here to. I have to do my job, which is to make this go okay as best I know how. And that clicks in when you perform. I mean, I think that's one of the weird secrets of performing, is that your body takes over, where your brain, will shut down. Where your brain feels fear, there's another part of your brain will just say, you don't have time for that now, and you'll do okay.
But Stewart, who, by the way, has such a great show and so many great writers and people to come through there, he had to also say, there's something happening between me and John. There's something going on here that I want him to come back.
When I went on that show, we made a lot of jokes about hobos. He loves hobo jokes.
As we all do.
And I mean, specifically hobos of the Great Depression, the dudes in the 20s and 30s who rode the rails and had their own weird hieroglyphics, and I didn't realize that this was a go-to for him, and I had my own raft of hobo jokes, and I talked about my own pantheon of fake facts about hobos and how they had their own code. The hobos would leave scrawled markings for each other as they went from town to town. So if you saw a picture of a star on a barn, you knew that there was a sheriff in that town who was really good with throwing stars, like a ninja sheriff. That was what hobos. You know what I mean? And then if you saw a picture of a scrawled picture, like stick figure of a woman with 3 triangles, it would mean a woman lives here who's alone with her children, which is a terrible thing. I don't know why hobos said this. Hobos weren't always the greatest dudes. But maybe I'm misreading. Maybe it just meant that there is a woman living there who loves triangles. I don't know what it was. And then if there was an H surrounded by a bunch of sun rays, that meant that was a signal that it was time for hobos to take over the United States government, which they did briefly for 2 weeks. They took over the Treasury and stopped issuing dollars and started issuing beef jerky dollars. And, we had a lot of fun talking about that. So I think that was what sealed the deal.
I just think almost the funniest part of that whole bit is that real hobo history is not enough for you. You know what I mean? Like, just finding there is so much bizarre hobo history already.
Yeah.
But that wasn't enough. You have to keep going.
There was a point where I was feeling like, am I giving hobos a bad name? And in particular, I was concerned that people would think that I was making fun of homeless people, which is not. I'm talking about the subculture of dudes in the 20s and 30s who, for one reason or another, left home either looking for work or just decided to abandon their families to ride the rails and live a life of itinerant labor or just ease. That was a subculture that they chose for themselves. And it was, at the time, it turns out, a really disruptive subculture that FDR truly wanted to try to stop from happening because men were leaving their families. It was like this weird, the middle class was fracturing because of the hobo movement. Now, that does not mean that FDR tried to destroy the hobo population with polio. That's something I made up.
It backfired.
But there was a truth to it. And then I was like, sort of like, but am I giving hobos a bad name? And then after writing almost the entire book, I went back. I then was listening to some hobo music, and there was this introduction. There's a very famous hobo song. Well, there's great hobo music. There's like all this culture came out. Like there are a lot of songs about hobos and trains, and it all comes from the 20s and 30s. And there was a song, a very famous song called "The Big Rock Candy Mountain," which you probably know, right? The Big Rock Candy Mountain, and candy grows on mountains or whatever it was. It's a song. I don't remember all the words at the moment because I'm having an asthma attack in my brain, but it's a song about how there's a big rock candy mountain where cigarettes grow on trees, and the soda, liquor runs through the streams, and it sort of describes the hobo paradise. And what I did not know until I heard this introduction to this song was that there are a lot of scholars who believe that was a song that was sung by hobos as they pass through town to lure children to go with them on the road, and that there's a candy mountain, and children love cigarettes, so that was that was sort of it was a weird sort of hobo seduction. Maybe not children, maybe younger men.
Yeah, why did they want them along? Why did they think to keep the hobo tribe going? Like we need some young blood.
Yeah, and it was primarily a male community. Yes. It had a lot of well, from what there was a dark side to hobo life. Let's just put it that way. A hobo wanted, according, and this is according to this. Like I'd heard this version of the song many a time, and it's making me very angry now that I can't remember the name of the artist who recorded this song. He also recorded Hallelujah, I'm a Bum, which is a great old hobo song. I heard both versions of it many times, but then I bought like the Smithsonian version of it, and there's this long monologue at the beginning where he's explaining like this was this was a song. Big Rock Candy Mountain was a song that hobos would sing to lure young men onto the road with them, with promises of sort of an easy life where everything could be just had at hand. And this is what he said, the prized possession of a hobo was to have a younger man with him who would go and get food for you and go and steal for you and do other things.
Yeah, it's called a twink. We're very, very familiar.
Look, it's satellite radio.
I think we can.
I don't know what you're talking about, but I think no. Yeah, and so, but as I say, I don't mean to malign all of these humans who are now long dead.
We're going to leave here, and guys with knapsacks on sticks are going to be waiting for us.
I believe you mean bindle stiffs. Yes. Please use the proper terminology. But it was, it was really, and so, like, the books were born out of my sort of just curiosity for stuff that I half remembered. Like, I don't know what it was about hobos. I feel like there must have been one Highlights magazine article about them once that lodged itself in my brain, and I love subcultures and hidden history, and I just find it to be hilarious. And then I would learn more and more about these things, and lots of times reality would outpace the weirdness. They would outpace the jokes that I could make about it and its weirdness.
The difficult thing with you, John, is no one ever knows when you're being serious. I will never know how many of these things are actual history, and the rest you're just bullshitting us for your own happiness.
I am not a manipulator. I will tell you when I am lying, and I'll tell you when I'm telling the truth, because the truth can be really weird and fun in itself. And when I'm lying, it's because I'm telling a joke, and I like to brag about my jokes. I like to take credit for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not Andy Kaufman. I'm not trying to keep you guessing.
So the comfort level of walking out there was already done. You had done the work.
No. Of course, I was terrified, but that's the thing about live performance of any kind. Do you know what I mean? You get out there. Stephen Colbert, have you ever heard of him?
Yes, I have.
He's
pretty good.
Very like John, an utter super genius. And I just learned something about him that I hadn't known, and it's a third-hand story, so it might not be true, but it meant a lot to me. Someone who was talking to one of his staffers was talking about what a genius he was, and the staffer said, Stephen trained himself to stop feeling embarrassment. And my friend was like, what do you mean? He said, no, he literally went through essentially like immersion therapy, where he would, when he was earlier in his career, he would do things like walk across the street very slowly, doing a funny walk and getting everyone mad at him. And he would do other things where he would just go, walk through restaurants and just go from table to table and, take the salt and pepper shakers away and replace it with, I'm making this up. I don't know about that. All I know is the thing about walking across the street. No one here seemed to understand what the fuck that was. So I started to imagine what would be a similar thing you could do.
Tell us more lies until we understand.
Yeah, but what would be the most embarrassing thing you could do? And he would do it, and he would do it over and over again until he no longer felt embarrassment, and it shows on his show that he just doesn't, nothing can embarrass him. And it gives him such latitude to do whatever comedically comes to mind, because he'll never wince in that way. And I am certainly not that way at all. I feel embarrassed all the time. I'm terrified right now. Do you know what I mean? But it's true that when you perform, the more you perform, the more confident you naturally get. And the faking, you have to be a fraud to some degree to start performing, but then that fraudulence decreases as you become more and more comfortable on stage, and you come to trust the fact that even if you don't know what's going to happen, most of the time your brain won't let you down, and you'll have something to say, or the right thing to say.
And it's almost like you have to have that courage of, I've done this enough, no matter what comes up, I'm going to find my way out of it.
But it's not it's pardon my language, it's not bull feces self-help. Do you understand? It's like, if you just have heart, it'll be fine. It's science. It's like, you go out there enough, you do it over and over and over and over again, you will naturally build up a sort of internal callus to the fear and the terror. which is, and that happens because of training, not because of belief in yourself, in a sort of
but it's also
the secret kind of way.
You do need to fail a lot before you will finally get to the point of failure, is whatever it is.
I have heard people say that. It's not been my experience.
Yeah, you've only succeeded.
Look at me. It's interesting. Maybe if I had failed more, I would have succeeded more, and I wouldn't even be here.
You're right. You'd be a major television
instead of a minor television personality. I mean, I think there's a truth to that to some degree, because, I started out. I got into book publishing because I do love writing and books, and I love writers, and I wanted to help them, but I also wanted to write short stories, but I also wanted to do comedy. I also loved journalism, and I wrote about food for a while, and I became a magazine writer largely because I wanted to go out in the world and meet interesting people and talk to them and have a reason to insinuate myself into their lives. Then I decided to write a book, and I went on The Daily Show, which just then became another even better reason to insinuate myself into people's lives. So instead of writing about Battlestar Galactica, I could now be on Battlestar Galactica. I love adventures. Do you know what I mean? And I will sort of just go, oh, that seems really interesting to me. I'll try that out. So my career has been really spread out over a lot of different media and a lot of different sort of modes and poses and ideas. And if I had been a little bit more focused, perhaps I wouldn't be minor. But this is just naturally a person who's spread too thin.
And yet, you've already brought up about so many of the different art forms being in trouble, whether it's journalism, TV, whatever.
Yeah. My best art form is subtle bragging.
Right. Yeah. But one of the best things you could do now is be in a lot of different places, because each project will, come to a shorter end than they used to.
Yes.
I thought that with HBO, you were on one of the best TV shows I've ever seen with Bored to Death.
Bored to Death, yeah.
And the fact that with all that talent and all that great writing, 3 years was the run for that. And I think a lot of places that would have been a 10, 12-year run. That kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with you. I think it was one of the greatest shows, and that is not subtle bragging on my part, because... I was a happy tourist on that show. Jonathan Ames, who created the show and wrote it and essentially supervised every aspect of it, is an old friend, and he had started as a writer, and he was the one who suggested me for the part of Lewis Green, the villain. It was a small part, but a recurring one, and so it wasn't a huge part of my life or my career, but it was this very happy couple of weeks for Three Springs where I could go and hang out with three of the most talented performers I'd ever met. Specifically, Oliver Platt, right, the greatest, David Rash, and I'm trying to think of some other guest stars on the show to avoid saying the 3 stars. That was my attempt at a joke. Forget it. You don't understand what I'm saying. And Olympia Dukakis. It's just amazing.
But even people who did walk on that show were great. Like Parker, everybody. Yeah. And there was never a time that I went, oh man, that wasn't, the show's falling off. And then just one day it's gone. And
F. Murray Abraham.
Right.
I shook hands with... I remember calling my wife. Shook hands with F.
You got that close
Salieri
with him.
himself, the king of mediocrities, was my hero as a child.
You identified a little bit.
Yeah, you understand that I was born at the age of 4. My childhood was rushing home from school to listen to Fresh Air and NPR, and then pop in the videotape of Amadeus again. But yeah, no. So that was, I consider that to be such a fantastic thing that I got to observe from the best seats in the house, and a real sadness to me that it's not there anymore, and not because I lost the job. That's sad, but because everyone lost that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that was something I had never seen before in the history of comedy, frankly, which was not just a comedy trio, but sort of like 3 individual double acts. Yeah. Because Jason and Ted had amazing chemistry together. Ted and Zach had amazing chemistry together, and Zach and Jason had amazing chemistry together. And, now Ted Danson recently got loaded in France and started talking about a Bored to Death movie. because he loves absinthe and loves talking to French journalists. I don't know what's going on in his mind.
But you're in if it comes up. You're ready to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, right. Don't hold your breath, said the asthmatic.
No, I think there's a market for it. I think people would love it. Seriously, such a great show.
But we also live in a culture now where, you know, where Arrested Development can come back. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's really interesting time in culture, whether and TV and filmed entertainment and comedy, where, you know, we have so many, certainly as consumers of cultures, we have so many more places to get stuff. But as creative people, we have so many more places to put stuff. And people who really love to make stuff can get it out there and find an audience and cultivate and nurture an audience. I mean, you know, what Louis C.K. has done is amazing in terms of finding and nurturing his own audience and bringing them along with him to the products that the projects that he wants to make. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't have to make as many compromises as he would have just 5 years ago, for example. Do you know what I mean?
Well, he probably wouldn't even have the opportunity to do any of that. I mean,
exactly so.
Oh, I'm going to also write and edit and direct my own TV. You know, to do kind of independent television didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. You know? And I think that, to my mind, that's going to be the new wave in comedy, and I think in general. I mean, you've seen what happened with podcasting. Is that a dirty word here in this building?
No, we actually, a lot of people go from podcasting to here.
Right, exactly.
And then we crush them. We just get them under, we just drag anything that has heart out of them.
Satellite radio is a good example too. I mean, satellite radio broke the monopoly of distribution that terrestrial radio had. There are so many more choices through satellite radio. Audiences can find people that they like. Podcasting, for example, has now, you know, for better or for worse, lowered the barrier of entry to people who want to make professional sounding radio. There's a lot of, you know, garbage out there, but then there are shows like Marc Maron's show, which is an amazing contribution to culture, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. And I think independent television is going to be soon sort of almost as easy to make as making a podcast, for good or for ill.
Right.
You already have, you know, the networks of distribution are getting laid out via the Netflixes, the YouTubes, and everything else. And the cost of making these shows is coming down as the technology becomes more and more available. I think it's harder to make, you know, it's going to be hard to develop the skills to actually make professional-looking television, but thanks to this, we get, you know, what seemed impossible, Arrested Development, back, you know, new again. So that's great.
And I think it's terrific, except for you're going to make the same kind of money doing a TV show as you do podcasting, which is, you know, people used to make a living at all these different things, and now it's like, hey, you're getting exposure, you're getting your name out there.
Right. Well, I'm sorry that no one ever told you that it was going to be difficult to be an artist. I'm sorry you were under the impression that it was going to. You know,
it just had been for so long.
The thing of it is that I come at it all from the point of view still of someone who wanted to sell short stories for $100 a year. Do you know what I mean? Like that there was no. I came to this whole world from a medium in which there. Not only there was no money, but the recreation of the publishing industry was sitting around drinking martinis and turning off the lights and laughing about how the whole industry was going to die. Do you know what I mean? So I'm excited still by the opportunity to just be able to create something and get it out there. And I do think that, you know, ultimately what it means is that artists are going to have to become a little bit more entrepreneurial in how they approach their creative lives, because there aren't those big distribution monopolies like big record companies, big publishing companies, big television networks that sort of so control distribution that they make a lot of money and then they can pay off a few people every year. Instead, it's a lot more competitive now. But artists like Louis have an advantage in the sense that not just that he had a popular show on FX and a following that he had built up honestly over years of touring and working, but he also was able to put it out there to people and say, look, you can take this special for free, or you can give me $5. It's your choice. Very few people in the world are so monstrous to not give a guy $5 for honest product. Do you know what I mean? And his audience responded in part because the price point was low, and in part because they knew that he was getting a higher percentage of that 90% of that was going to go to him as opposed to a huge corporation that they don't care about. I think that is the way that artists are going to get paid, because they can just, by working with their audiences directly, those audiences, which frankly are going to steal it all anyway, unless you give them a reasonable option. You have to you help them to learn that if you give me the money, it's going to me to support my livelihood and to support what I do for you. If you like it, vote with your dollars. It's not going to. I'm not going to name a major corporation because honestly, I don't know who owns who anymore. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to get on. I think that's so the numbers might be smaller in general, but for the individual creative entrepreneur and the team that helps him or her do what they're going to do, I think it'll be enough to make a living. And honestly, I think that's a good place to be in your life creatively.
And there's no swinging back, you don't think? I mean, there will be a new Time Warner waiting to be, born out there.
I think the opportunity right now really is for small shops that want to create and curate, let's just say with regard to comedy, right? Now, I like making comedy. If I wanted to go back to my literary agent days and try to figure out how to take a really talented comedian and bring him or her to the world, I wouldn't necessarily be saying go and try to go out and try to get auditions for a sitcom on a major network. I mean, that's a huge opportunity, and certainly don't turn those things down. But I would say go and make your thing. Go and make your thing. Put it on Funny or Die. Put it on my damn channel. Find a partnership with one of those people. Put it on YouTube. You own it. It becomes associated with you, and then if someone you would be able to sell that down the road, or maybe someone will buy it from you and put it out elsewhere. But we have an opportunity now to make your thing. And if you don't want to make your thing, then it would be my job to set up a small shop to help you make your thing, to set you up with the companies that can provide streaming, to set you up with the people who are going to get the word out there, to set you up with, those things. Small shops that help artists reach audiences, I think is what the future is going to be, more than a new big Time Warner. Because all those big businesses were built on a monopoly of distribution, of moving solid things into retail stores, and obviously that's not coming back. So,
and it's really funny because a lot of young people here that are either in college or coming out of college that are looking for the next thing to do, but it isn't about working for a corporation anymore. It's about starting something, particularly with your creative friends.
And for all of my trashing of the Deranged Millionaires Club, where everyone boos the 47% of moochers, the reality is I'm an artist, therefore I am by nature an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? I also am a business person. I also want to benefit from my success as best as possible. And I love the idea of getting out there and making a thing and bringing it to the world. That's why I don't work for a corporation answering the phones and renting cars out to people. You know what I mean? I don't want to work for a corporation. I think it's a lot more exciting to not work for a corporation and make yourself or in partnership with people that you trust, the corporation, as it were.
And even when you went back to podcasting, very few of them started that to make a living at it. They were all pretty much surprised that things got, even picked up. I think Maron was certainly surprised that people started to pick up on his work.
And the story of Mark Maron doing WTF is it's an amazing thing, because this was a guy who just, I think he would be the first to say over and over again in quasi-suicidal tones that his career was not where he wanted it to be as a stand-up when he started doing that podcast. Do you know what I mean? But he was still doing stand-up, still making great comedy, and still had something that he wanted to say. The podcast allowed him to find his voice in a new way, to find a whole new career for himself that not only allowed him to express a huge talent in terms of talking to people and getting the truth out of them and bringing them to talk about the creative process, but also suddenly became, in partnership with good business partners, a valuable, or I should say a profitable business unto itself. I think. I haven't looked at their books, but it looks that way, and also completely revived his touring stand-up career. How could anyone be happier? Do you know what I mean? Like, would starring in a sitcom on the CW make you happier than that? I'll take it, CW.
Right.
I'll do it.
That's what there would be some kind of Here Comes John and Mark show. Come down next year. You both just sell it. Yes. Yeah. Give it to us. 2.5 Men remake.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I haven't talked to Mark about it, but I definitely am. I'm going to LA next week to pitch him and me in a sitcom without his permission, where we play. It's going to be the fictionalized version of American Pickers. That's what I've decided. Do you know that reality show? That's actually a good idea. What if Mark Maron and I did a sitcom where we play American Pickers, and he plays the tall, skinny, loathsome one, and I play the short, fat, mustachioed, loathsome one. Sorry, American Pickers, you're not loathsome. I watch that.
They suddenly feel bad, along with hobos. Hobos are. I did a show. One of the things I've really been enjoying doing this year is live performance, because as you pointed out, my training and background is not as a stand-up comic. I love stand-up comedy, love seeing it, but as I say, I was a chuckle meister. Do you know what I mean? Like a literary humorist who would occasionally sort of do an imitation of stand-up comedy. But for the past year, I started getting out there and doing more material from my books, and after a while I wasn't bringing my books to the stage anymore, and I wasn't reciting, I was performing, and I was reacting to the audience, and the audience would give me stuff and I would work with it, and I would find new connections as I was up there on stage, and I would realize that my imitation of stand-up comedy was getting closer to stand-up comedy. So for me, that's a really exciting new thing in my career, and I don't claim to be an expert at it, and I don't claim to I don't claim to be an expert at it. I claim to be an expert at anything else, but that's the one thing I kind of don't claim to be an expert at, because I respect it so much. And I love going out and performing, and I've been really having a great time going all across the country and doing my imitation of stand-up comedy. I was at the Turner Ballroom in Milwaukee, had a great audience there, and saw that the next night the tall, skinny dude from American Pickers was coming. And later, I think he sold out 2 shows, like in a 900-seat house. Like, what is the show he's doing? Like, is he literally buying things from the audience? Like, what is going on where American Picker, like, that's a live show that people are going out to see? You're nodding very firmly. Did you see the show?
No,
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the pretty lady. Literally a guy who looks like a hobo.
Yeah, I know.
Didn't you take off your hat inside? And you too, sir. Take off your hat. Come on, hipsters, get them off. You may leave your hat on. That's right. Beautiful ladies can leave their hats on.
Is this the part of the thing where you start to mingle with people?
Yeah.
You go through here like a madman. Take your hat off. Oh, like, Jesus Christ, you're an asthmatic. They're going to beat the shit out of us.
No. They can't touch me. I'm on television.
You are.
Yeah, that's right.
And since you grew the mustache, I think people fear you. You should have probably done that as a kid, because
believe me, I would.
You kind of come off like a Die Hard victim. I think you could. I mean, a villain. Like,
thank you. I was going to say.
Dead in the opening scenes.
Yeah. You mean like her boss in Die Hard 1? What was his name?
When he was
the Japanese American actor.
Oh, that was my. What was it?
Mr. Takagi, right?
Yeah.
Takagi? That's right. He says, "No, I'll go talk to them." Boom, back of the head.
Or you could be like the other guy, John, baby, listen, we got some terrorists.
Oh, yeah.
He's my favorite.
Oh, yeah. Well, he had a beard, that guy.
Yeah.
It's Die Hard Trivia Hour with Ron and John. Believe me, Justin Long, who played the Mac in the Apple ads and is a friend, one of the funniest guys in the world. And we were doing those ads when he was in the most recent Die Hard movie, and I had this dream in my heart that Bruce Willis was going to retire, and they were grooming Justin Long to be the new Bruce Willis for the next Die Hard movie, and that I could be the Alan Rickman character, that I could be the villain.
You'd be perfect.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not what's
happening. That's not going to happen.
Guess what? Bruce Willis is coming back.
Yeah.
I guess I should have seen that coming. But I still have my Mark Maron American Pickers project, so that'll be...
That's all you need. The book is That Is All. And if you just listen to this past hour, you know that when you read the book, you want to put this voice in because it's really, really funny writing and a funny character.
But here's another thing.
Yeah.
If you don't want to read the book, or you are illiterate, and you still don't mind my voice, there's an audiobook you can buy.
Highly recommend it.
Which I'm very happy about too, because that is very performed, and I also conned all of my friends to come in, and a lot of musicians that I like, and hilarious people, so it's funny.
This went by so fast. Thanks so much for being in here.
Well, we're gonna keep talking for another hour. So.
Well, we can do that, but without the satellite.
You can leave, but I'm still I'm still going to talk to Hobo and the American Picker for sure.
John Hodgman, everybody.
Thank you very much.
That was great.
Thank you.